Hello, my name is Callum. Welcome to Stupid Canada, the show with a title that becomes more applicable every week. Canada's stupid, I talk about it. Okay, let's go. First up, we got Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland once again being incredibly ignorant about the cost of living, saying that the economy isn't suffering, and if you're feeling like it is, it's just the vibes, bro. Suggesting that we're not in a recession, but rather a vibe session. Yeah, guys, don't worry. The economy's fucking great. You all just have bad vibes. Late on bills? Bad vibes. Struggling to pay rent? Yeah, chill on that. The vibes are off. Can't afford to feed your kids? Vibe check. You're killing my mood, bro. And honestly, the Deputy Prime Minister citing vibes to argue that people aren't actually poor, they just feel poor because they have no money, would be hilarious if it weren't so severely deranged and insulting. I honestly didn't think she could top implying that people would be less poor if they just canceled their Disney Plus subscription, but here we are. Like, you'll be less poor if you just stop having poor vibes. What are we doing? But Chrystia's take on this actually gets worse, if you can believe that. Not only is the economy good and all the negative energy, bad vibes people just need to recognize that, but their bad vibes, if gone unchecked, will actually ruin the good economy. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm on board. I now realize that we can manifest a good economy by channeling positive economic vibes into the atmosphere. I'm currently aligning my stop being poor chakras by rubbing economy crystals. Quick, everybody start meditating and we can all collectively astral project to a dimension where I can afford butter. Setting aside that this is the economic policy equivalent of making a vision board, Chrystia Freeland is right that economists are actually talking about the vibe session, a term that she probably single-handedly just ruined, albeit in a way that diametrically opposes how it's being talked about here. Even the economist who coined the term vibe session, Kyla Scanlon, basically said Chrystia is using it incorrectly. In the kindest way possible, but yeah.
I don't know if the word was used in the context that I would use it. I think when you just say, hey everybody, just feel a little bit better, it'll be okay, it just doesn't work.
So how is Kyla using the term?
And the vibecession is this idea that there's a temporary decline in sentiment despite the economic data feeling relatively okay.
I think the economic data isn't always telling the full story, and there's kind of these structural problems where people are like, okay, you know, the economy's saying one thing, but like I can't afford a home and like my food's really expensive, like the data's good but I don't feel good, and that's kind of the idea of the vibe session. I think the vibe session is a useful tool because like we really do need to figure out the data situation, like what economic data points are actually going to tell a story that can align with sentiment. Like something is just totally off balance.
Yeah, so a stark difference between Chrystia's assessment that people have bad vibes even though they should have good vibes because economic data, which honestly just feels pretty invalidating, and Kyla's assessment that there's something inherently wrong with the economic data. Namely that it doesn't actually represent what's happening in people's day-to-day lives. And there's a reason for that. And that's that the economic data that the government collects doesn't actually measure economic pressures that people are facing in their day-to-day lives. Let's start by covering what a recession actually is. According to TD Bank, the most basic definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters where the economy contracts, which usually equates to a reduction in gross domestic product. GDP. So basically, if GDP goes down for 2 consecutive 3-month periods, it's a recession. And GDP, which measures the total market value of all goods produced in a country, includes wages, rents, interests, and here's where it gets tricky, profits. Meaning if corporate profit takes a larger share of GDP than wages, which we know it is because while wages remain stagnant, seemingly every corporate entity in every industry is constantly posting record profits, then the GDP can still continue to rise. Meaning we wouldn't be in a recession, but that wouldn't stop everyone from still being poor as fuck, meaning we're in a vibe session. So the vibe session, at least according to Chrystia Freeland, is when a bunch of selfish poors aren't celebrating the fact that Galen Weston Jr. made a fuck ton of extra money this year. So Chrystia is either so out of touch that she doesn't understand what the economic measurements even mean for Canadians, or she's using these numbers to gaslight people. Utilizing a term, by the way, which had an original intent of validating struggling individuals and bridging the gap between economic measurements and the actual cost of living. When it comes to housing even, the abysmal state of the housing market, on paper, actually looks good for the economy. Like when a family buys an insanely overinflated home for $1 million, that's $1 million being injected into the economy and increasing the GDP. And Chrystia Freeland's like, hey, why are you so mad about paying $1 million for a fucking apartment when that's good for the economy? That's bad vibes. Chrystia, your vibes are so bad that they've brought me from a vibe session to a crippling vibepression. But don't worry, because the government has a solution for these bad vibes totally killing their buzz. Temporarily removing GST on select items, including restaurant meals, takeout, and booze. That's right, the sitting government's solution to bad vibes is the exact same solution a frat bro would come up with at the worst party you've ever been to. Whoa, these vibes are off. Let's order pizza and get drunk as fuck. And maybe I'm being too hard on Chrystia. Perhaps my vibes are bad. Sorry about that. I guess doing something is better than doing nothing. But branding the temporary GST holiday, which frankly won't do much anyway, as simply a way to make people feel better and continuing to frame the economy as spectacular, is a huge mistake for the Liberals. And it's not much different than the shit Democrats were saying about the American economy, an economy the term vibecession was coined to describe, before losing bigly to the Republicans. Here's the creator of the term vibecession, Kyla Scanlon, discussing the mistakes of the Harris campaign as far as not taking people's financial realities seriously.
In that election, Joe Biden's campaign tended to say that his economy was doing great, that the media were telling people bad news. What do you think he risked by not taking the vibe session seriously?
He risked the entire election. He lost. Harris lost.
You think that's why he lost?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this was an election that was dominated by media, and it was an election that was dominated by economics. You know, there has been this kind of like, oh, everybody should be feeling good about the economy. Like, look at all the manufacturing spend, the CHIPS Act, the IRA, the IIJA, and like those are great, but like that's manufacturing dollars. That's not necessarily, the average person isn't always going to be feeling that.
And it seems like the Liberals have not learned anything from the mistakes of their American counterparts. Because here's Chrystia Freeland doing the exact same thing. Oh yeah, the economy's great. Look at these numbers. Fuck the numbers. The numbers don't reflect what's really happening as far as affordability, which is what people care about. We don't care how much oil companies made last quarter. We care how the economy is affecting us. And it's affecting us badly, regardless of the numbers, which is what vibecession is supposed to mean. And by turning it around on Canadians, the ones experiencing it, who on average make 20% of what Chrystia Freeland does, and basically saying, nah, you guys are wrong, vibes are bad, administer a vibe check or you'll make the economy worse. It alienates Canadians, just like the Democrats alienated Americans in the United States and sent them to the Republican Party. The same thing is happening here. People are turning to the conservatives for the sole fact that the liberals seem out of touch as fuck. And they don't realize or care that conservative policies are even worse for the cost of living. That Pierre Poilievre is objectively bad for workers, that he didn't even want to give people COVID relief, or that his proposed tax cuts benefit only the wealthiest Canadians. And yeah, the conservatives are obviously in a better position to talk about how bad things suck under the current government. Like, if the current government did the same thing, they'd basically just be talking shit about themselves. But to ignore the situation completely and suggest everyone else does the same because we can just manifest a good economy via positive vibes is fucking insane. Gaslighting voters? Not the vibe if you don't want your party to implode next election. Forget the vibecession, keep it up, and it's about to be a vibe-jority conservative government, which is going to be very bad vibes. It's going to be a vibe-zaster, actually. Next up, another liberal blunder. We got Justin Trudeau and the liberals randomly becoming anti-immigrant for some reason. I guess cabinet member Randy Boissonnaud getting caught pretending to be indigenous just sent them into fuck it, why not territory. Like, let's just go full racism and see what happens. Justin Trudeau is ordering a year's supply of black face paint as we speak. Let's have a listen.
Immigration. Let's talk about it.
Oh, shit. Just a second. Let me get my Make America Great Again hat. Okay, I'm ready.
Increasingly, bad actors like fake colleges and big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system for their own interests.
Oh, thank God. You're talking about corporate interests fucking everything up again. See, that makes sense. For a second there, I thought you were gonna blame immigrants. I guess I don't need the hat.
So we're doing something major. We're reducing the numbers of immigrants that will come to Canada for the next 3 years.
God damn it! Fuck! Okay, I guess the hat's going back on. Jesus Christ, we were this close. You started so strong. How long did that take? 30 seconds. We're less than 30 seconds into the video. At least it can't get worse, right? Right?
There are two kinds of immigration in Canada. The one you probably think of most is permanent immigration, like when families come to Canada to settle and call it home. Every year, the government determines the right number of permanent residents that we want to admit. That's how it's been done for decades. But a plan that only talks about permanent immigration misses the other pathway, temporary immigration. Temporary residents are people who come to Canada for a limited time. Like,
Whoa. Back it up. John Mohammed Doe? John Mohammed Doe. That's the default immigrant we're going with? John Mohammed Doe from Pakistan? John Mohammed Doe, I'm not gonna lie, this feels like a microaggression. It really does. It feels like a macroaggression, actually. John Mohammed Doe sounds like J.K. Rowling brainstorming a Muslim character. But we're gonna keep it moving. John Mohammed Doe.
historically, Canada's annual immigration plan just looked at permanent residents. The number of temporary students and workers that we admitted each year was left to the demands of the economy. It was usually a small proportion of our population, so it's never been a part of the long-term immigration plan. But after the pandemic, our economy came roaring back quickly, and we needed a lot of workers fast. Temporary foreign workers became such a significant part of our workforce that it'd be a mistake not to include them when we plan our immigration levels. So this year, we did exactly that for the first time.
But why are temporary foreign workers such a significant part of the economy? Well, apparently because of a labor shortage.
Canada is in the middle of a huge labor shortage.
Chronic shortage of labor.
Ontario is facing a generational labor shortage. 380,000 jobs are going unfilled.
But is that even actually true? Are these jobs going unfilled because of a labor shortage? Or because of a wage shortage? Well, there's good evidence that it's the latter. According to the Canadian Union of Public Employees, distinguishing between real labor shortages and employers who just want cheap workers, a wage shortage, can be challenging. One sign of a true labor shortage is when the wages offered for vacant positions rise, with employers being forced to offer more money to attract and keep qualified workers. Something that is clearly not happening in Canada, as wages have been roughly stagnant since 2006, as per the Toronto Star. So is there a shortage of labor or an abundance of people unwilling to work for low wages? Spoiler alert, it's the second one. So when these industries say we need more workers,
Every sector came to us with the same message. After 2 years with closed borders, we need more people, more workers, fast.
what they're really saying is they need more people willing to work for as little money as possible. Because foreign workers are often coming from countries with even lower wages, they're often willing to accept jobs at minimum wage. And if businesses are bringing in foreign workers just so they don't have to pay competitive wages, well, maybe that falls into the category of bad actors that Trudeau was talking about.
Increasingly, bad actors like big chain corporations have been exploiting our immigration system.
But why in the fuck are we not going after these bad actors? Why is the solution to blame immigrants and reduce immigration? We could, and maybe this is a radical idea here, actually be punitive to these bad actors. Issue corporate fines, shut down businesses, even make it criminal to game the system, as Trudeau puts it.
But some saw that as an opportunity to profit, to game the system. We've seen way too many large corporations doing this.
What's that? Corporations are doing horrible, evil shit again? That's it. I'm putting my foot down. No more immigrants. But if the libs are too scared to go after corporations directly, maybe they could do something to make it so businesses can't just get away with paying workers the bare minimum, aka the minimum wage. A minimum wage, by the way, that is not a living wage. So here's a crazy idea that just popped into my head just now. Raise the fucking minimum wage, because immediately it fixes the labor shortage, which evidently is actually just a wage shortage. And it also ensures corporations aren't exploiting foreign workers, but compensating them fairly for their work, as they should. And we don't have to do the anti-immigrant thing. And I can take off this fucking hat, because it doesn't take an economist to figure out that inflation plus wage stagnation equals a cost of living crisis. That's not because of immigration. It's because greedy fucking capitalists want to retain as much profit as possible at the expense of workers. But don't worry, Trudeau takes some of the blame here. For not blaming immigrants soon enough, that is.
Looking back, when the post-pandemic boom cooled and businesses no longer needed the additional labor help, as a federal team, we could have acted quicker and turned off the taps faster.
The taps being the flow of immigrants. So literally the only thing he's sorry for is not becoming anti-immigrant sooner. Absolutely wild statement. Later on in the video on Justin Trudeau's YouTube, by the way, how does Justin Trudeau only have 20,000 subscribers on YouTube? Holy shit. I just realized it's because he only started the channel a year ago, and that was to answer my Twitter question about how a dog would wear pants. I'm not joking.
Okay, question from Callum. If a dog wore pants, would he wear them like this or like this? I don't know. I think the whole point of pants is to cover your bum.
The first prime minister with a YouTube account only made the account to answer my question about dog pants. Incredible. Historic. Somebody put this in a textbook, quick. Later in the video, Trudeau implies the housing crisis is being fueled by immigrants. Something that a rising number of people in Canada actually believe, which makes no fucking sense, especially when it comes to temporary foreign workers, the main focus of Trudeau's video, because not only are temporary foreign workers, you guessed it, living here temporarily, over 60% of temporary foreign workers live in homes with 5 to 20 people. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure 20 people living in one fucking house doesn't put a strain on the housing market. You know what does put a strain on the housing market? 1 million homes that nobody lives in, which, yes, is actually happening. In 2021, data on vacant housing revealed 1.3 million homes just straight up not being lived in. And this figure doesn't just include newly built homes that haven't been moved into yet, which tend to be bought up pretty quick. It's also secondary properties that remain largely unoccupied, like vacation homes, which chill out. Nobody's suggesting you need to give up your cottage. The big one is homes that are unoccupied, on the rental market or up for sale, and not on the market, being held by speculators in anticipation of rental or sale price going up, suggesting that maybe the housing crisis is more of a pricing crisis. Like, all these vacant homes are too expensive to be rented or sold, and many of them are even being intentionally held empty by speculators until the price goes up and they can get an even better return on investment. There's not a supply issue. A lot of people want you to believe there is, and that's what they'll say is driving up the price of housing, but there clearly isn't. The only scarcity is that prices are so exuberantly high already, resulting in people being priced out of housing that is clearly available. Like, of course there's a lack of access to housing. Who the fuck can afford these things? It's an artificial scarcity driven by profiteering interests. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Article from 2022, data from 2021, maybe the situation has changed. Well, if it has, it's certainly not because of temporary foreign workers who, again, aren't contributing to this problem, but there's evidence that the data hasn't changed much, if at all. Perhaps the most damning being the recent attempt to count these vacant properties and tax the owners of them, which resulted in about 780,000 vacant homes accounted for. Oh, but Callum, that's less than 1.3 million. Nah. Let him finish. The count was supposed to be done on May 1st, 2023, but the deadline to file was initially extended until October 31st. Then, just hours before the new deadline, it was extended again until April 30th, 2024. Nearly a full year from the original deadline. Better Dwelling, who says this is Canada's attempt to hide its vacant home count, explains why this looks like the government is allowing real estate investors to cook their books, effectively cooking Canada's books as well. Delaying a deadline by a few hours most likely means they didn't get a suitable response, potentially indicating more vacant homes than expected. By delaying the deadline, Canada is also conveniently extending its vacant home count. Delaying helps to extend the liquidity window and minimize the problem. Kind of like when corrupt countries have to implement beneficial ownership tracking. They'll often provide several warnings and delays to help plutocrats liquidate or hide assets. This helps cook the books on data, minimizing the size of the problem to the public. There's no money laundering in North Korea, just like there's no vacant homes in Canada. So basically, the government acknowledged there was over 1 million vacant homes in 2021, most of which are being held dormant by real estate investors, then seemingly conspired with those real estate investors to hide similar results in 2023, and is now subtly blaming immigrants for the whole problem, suggesting that reducing immigration will somehow do something to address the issue. Because, as Better Dwelling puts it, real estate investors own this country. Because of course, politicians are expected to look after their donors, but also because it's just human nature to look after your own self-interests, whether you're a politician or not. And get this, really alarming statistic here, 30% of politicians hold investment property. So expecting politicians to go after real estate investors is like expecting this example to go after analogies. The call is coming from inside the house, okay? Given the choice, politicians will never go after real estate investors because they'd be fucking over donors, their rich friends, and themselves. But now they're blaming immigrants, which is just twisted and fashy, because fascism is just a knee-jerk response to an obvious need for socialism. Whoa, you guys are mad that there's an artificial scarcity of housing because me and all my friends are hoarding all this excess property for our own commercial interests? Hey, look over there, immigrants. But curbing immigration won't stop this. Like, do we think we're gonna lower immigration rates and all of a sudden house prices are gonna magically drop? No. That's not how it works. House prices in Canada have been on a consistently upward trend since, well, forever. A big reason for that is everyone, even private citizens, see their home as an investment. It's an appreciating asset, so you're always gonna want to sell it for more than you bought it. And on a long enough timeline, that's gonna make housing eventually unaffordable. That's just fucking math. Basic pattern recognition. So, I mean, profiteering interests on even an individual level is concerning and probably worth having a discussion about. Like, should housing even be an asset? I don't know, probably not, in my opinion, but that's a small portion of the problem, and we can avoid even addressing that for a long time if we address the big issue. Because do you see this dramatic increase in the price of housing around the 90s and 2000s? Yeah, well, that's when industrial profiteering interests started getting involved. Because that's around the time corporate landlords started dominating the housing market, buying up all the houses they could, creating artificial scarcity, and renting them out at rates profitable to them. It's also when real estate investment trusts, REITs, were introduced. And both of these types of businesses, corporate landlords and REITs, have a business model solely based on extracting as much money as possible from people's housing needs. But instead of blaming corporate landlords and REITs for what is clearly a result of their existence, we're blaming immigrants. Which, instead of solving any economic issues as it relates to housing, just creates social issues, and frankly economic ones, as it relates to immigrants. Namely, a bunch of fucking weirdos calling for mass deportations in Canada a la Donald Trump style. And it's not just rogue psychos organizing anti-immigrant parades like we saw in Hamilton, Ontario, featuring these guys who appear to be cosplaying the Power Rangers, but they couldn't decide who would go as the Black Ranger. It's morphin' time! Shift into turbo racism. It's also the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, who insists the government needs a plan to make 5 million people leave the country when their visas expire.
About a week ago, Justin Trudeau admitted that he broke our immigration system, and that brings new challenges. His own published documents show there are 4.9 million people here temporarily that are supposed to leave by December 31st of next year, 13 months from now. 4.9 million people. We asked what the plan was to track their departures, and yesterday his immigration minister said, we're just going to take people at their word. He admits that there have been 2 ISIS terrorists allowed into our country. What is the plan to protect our security and reinstate sovereignty over who is in our country?
Now, he didn't exactly announce that he's joining the racist rangers and say mass deportation now, but in context, I don't know what a plan could mean other than deporting everyone. And I'm not the only one who interpreted it this way. A lot of Pierre's supporters are also of the opinion that he's implying support for a mass deportation campaign, which they're celebrating, by the way. And it shouldn't need to be explained how this type of rhetoric demonizes and dehumanizes temporary foreign workers, contributing to racism. But here it is anyway. Human Rights First says, xenophobia and anti-immigrant extremism perpetuate the idea that immigrants, or people who are perceived to be foreign or outsiders, threaten a country's founding ideals and must be excluded from positions of power, citizenship, or even residence. The movement and its ideology are reactionary. Movement leaders often leverage social anxieties about demographic shifts, social change, and political and economic uncertainty to fuel xenophobia. Sound familiar? The movement spreads negative stereotypes and disinformation that dehumanize and criminalize immigrants, people with immigrant heritage, and communities of color by portraying them as inherently threatening. So, the social issues are clearly there. But the economic impacts of a mass deportation mission also really can't be understated. Deporting just one person costs an average of $4,750 according to migrantrights.ca. So a campaign to deport 4.9 million people would cost over $23 billion of taxpayer money. And the supposedly fiscal conservative leader of the Conservative Party implying we should be spending that kind of money to remove economic contributors, workers, taxpayers, is ironic in the least funny way possible. And all of this from liberals and conservatives is just anti-immigrant nonsense disguised as economic policy, which it is clearly not. And speaking of anti-immigrant nonsense, let's talk about Donald Trump. I guess I'm keeping the hat. The United States, the country that Canada is always trying to be as crazy as, really continues to outdo itself. As President-elect Donald Trump recently announced that he would be going through with his proposed 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican products when he takes office. You know, the thing he said he was gonna do the whole time while campaigning for election. The weird thing though is that initially the tariffs were supposed to be about increasing federal revenue and protecting manufacturing jobs in the United States. And now he's saying it's a border control thing. And you know, if Trump can make it anti-immigrant, he will. He'll find a way. He's basically saying if Canada and Mexico want to stop the tariffs, they have to do reverse border control, stopping illegal immigration and drug smuggling into the United States, which is interesting because obviously countries usually do their own border control, not threaten other countries into doing it for them. Like, it's a pretty aggressive policy, especially for the US to do to, you know, neighbors and allies like Mexico and Canada. And most Canadian politicians are pretty upset about this, including Doug Ford, who says it feels like a family member has stabbed him in the heart.
It's like a family member stabbing you right in the heart.
Which, honestly, he's probably experienced. I'm sure impromptu stabbings are just standard procedure during Ford family get-togethers. Like, someone smokes a little too much crack, pulls out a knife. I could see it. But let's see what else Doug said.
Last night at 6:35, we received the biggest threat we've ever received from our closest friends and ally, from President-elect Trump, that they're threatening to put a 25% tariff on all goods coming across the border into the U.S. and Mexico. What I found unfair about the comments is to compare us to Mexico. And I can tell you, Canada is no Mexico.
Okay, not sure what that means or why it's unfair to be compared to another country, but I'm getting rid of the hat in case he's doing a racism, because I'm not going to be associated with that. Let's continue.
I found his comments unfair. I found them insulting. It's like a family member stabbing you right in the heart. I spent a lot of time in the U.S., and I have yet to talk to one American that has any issue with Canadians.
Oh, okay. I get it now. He is doing a racism. Listen, folks. All my American friends are racist to Mexicans, but none are racist to Canadians. So why am I being grouped in with Mexicans? But despite feeling like he got stabbed by a family member, Doug pretty much just folded to Trump's demands and said he would indeed attempt to secure the border.
I had a conversation with the Prime Minister after he spoke to President-elect Trump last night. The threat is serious. We need to do better on our borders. We need to give the resources to CBSA, which are fine people. And I know, talking to other premiers last night, that we will do everything we can as provincial governments and territorial governments to secure our borders. When it comes to drugs, 1 ounce of any illegal drug is 1 ounce too many going back and forth across the border. 1 illegal going across the border back and forth is 1 too many illegals.
Super cringe describing people as illegals. Like, even saying illegal immigrant feels pretty gross, but just shortening it to illegals is, Yikes. But even more cringe, known drug dealer Doug Ford taking such a strong stance against international drug trafficking. I sure hope all that hash you were selling in high school was locally produced, Doug. Nobody let Doug Ford cross the border. The future of Canada's exports may depend on it. All right, let's keep going.
The Prime Minister confirmed today that we're going to have a First Minister's meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. We need to make sure that he has a strong plan to protect and secure our borders and make sure we address the threat from the U.S. But again, we're the closest allies and friends the Americans have.
No, actually, that's Mexico, the country you were insulted to be compared to. So maybe Doug is right that Canada is no Mexico. Maybe Mexico should be insulted to be compared to small potatoes Canada over here. Someone not insulted by the comments, but rather completely on board and willing to help Big Daddy Trump do whatever it takes to secure the border and make her province seem even more like America Junior, is Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Unwilling to denounce Trump's comments or even acknowledge them as threatening as Doug Ford did, Danielle, who plans to attend Trump's inauguration ceremony in Washington, has promised to patrol the Alberta-Montana border to keep America happy, saying, "We need to address the issues. We can't downplay them, and we can't play the yeah, but game, and we can't pretend that the economic interests are going to override those very legitimate interests." Again, doing the characteristically fiscal conservative thing of ignoring fiscal conservatism to focus exclusively on social conservative issues. So much so that she's willing to focus on the social conservative issues of a different fucking country rather than the economic issues of her own province, and even use provincial money and resources to help. Like, it's more important to signal to the anti-immigrant orangutan that we're anti-immigrant too than it is to stand up for our own economic interests, despite nearly 90% of Alberta's exports going to America. Oh, you want to fuck up our economy? How can I help? Like, it does a lot to indicate the political state of Alberta when our premier makes Doug Ford's response seem kind of reasonable. Even when like 3/4 of it was just being anti-Mexican for no reason. I hate it here. Basically, I hate it here. I mean, even Pierre Poilievre, who's basically Trump Jr., or Temu Trump, as I've seen people calling him lately, which is hilarious. Like, I'm mad I didn't come up with that. Hey mom, can we have Trump? We have Trump at home. Even that idiot acknowledged the tariffs as unfair and said Canada should retaliate if necessary. And didn't say that that retaliation would include securing their border for them. Because even the dumbest guy around thinks that's a dumb fucking idea. I am begging the provincial conservatives to stop making the federal conservatives look reasonable. Like, that shouldn't even be possible. But Pierre Poilievre can't maintain the illusion of reasonability for long. If it ever seems like he's being reasonable, you just have to let him talk for long enough to completely undo any progress he pretends to have made. Because just recently, Pierre Poilievre also had the bright idea to completely undermine international law as it pertains to the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Pierre's comments, which we'll listen to in just a second here, come after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he would respect international law, particularly that of the International Criminal Court, who is seeking the arrest and subsequent trial of Netanyahu for apparent war crimes he sanctioned in Palestine. Seems reasonable, right? The Prime Minister acknowledging the International Criminal Court, for which Canada is a signatory, and recognizing their legal authority? Well, apparently it's not that simple. Because I guess a world leader deciding to follow international law is somehow controversial, especially to Pierre Poilievre, who believes Canada should not respect the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and even go a step further and just start arresting random guys unrelated to the situation. Let's have a listen.
What was your reaction to Justin Trudeau's reaction to the ICC decision and implying the Prime Minister of a Democratic ally, Israel, would be arrested if he stepped on Canadian soil? What did you think of that?
It just shows once again how extreme Justin Trudeau has become.
Yeah, recognizing international law. So extreme. I thought this was the stop the crime guy. Stop the crime. No, not like that.
He wants to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel while he would not commit to the same for the Ayatollah of Iran.
Yeah, good point. Why wouldn't Justin Trudeau arrest the Ayatollah of Iran? Oh, hey, I know. Maybe because the Ayatollah of Iran isn't wanted by the ICC, you stupid fuck. Pierre Poilievre is literally asking why Justin Trudeau doesn't just make up his own international law. Even if we did arrest the Ayatollah of Iran, it's not like we could hand him over to the ICC because, again, he's not wanted by the ICC. I guess we could, take him as a prisoner of war. A war that would be started by arresting the Ayatollah of Iran. What the actual fuck? What is Pierre proposing here?
It's another example of how radical Justin Trudeau is, how this extreme woke agenda, it permeates everything he does.
Yes. Another example of how woke means absolutely nothing. Woke is when you won't arrest a world leader without legal precedent to do so. But apparently Pierre wasn't the only person who was irrationally angry about the Canadian government saying they would follow international law. Which brings us to this bitch who had a lot to say about me on Twitter. Spenny, what's good? Never thought I'd be in a Twitter beef with Spenny from Kenny versus Spenny, but here we are, I guess. This was a crazy couple days. And I really do mean a couple days. Because Spenny spent nearly a week in my mentions absolutely crashing the fuck out. Bit of background here. Spenny, a man famous for accidentally taking too much drugs on TV, evidently took too much drugs and started pro-Pierre Poilievre posting. Saying, I'm voting for Pierre Poilievre. I'm not thrilled about it, but fuck Trudeau. I'm willing to deal with the cuts to save this country. No choice. And I found this post weird because in the past, Spenny has seemed pretty anti-Pierre, even posting some of my videos which are critical of Pierre. But I guess, like Pierre Poilievre, Spenny was pissed about Trudeau saying he'd respect the International Criminal Court decision regarding Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, just recognizing international law. Something any world leader should probably do. Something Benjamin Netanyahu wouldn't be wanted for if he did. So I quote tweeted his pro-Pierre tweet saying, Kenny versus Spenny was on TV for nearly a decade, and somehow this is the most humiliating thing Spenny's ever done. To which Spenny replied, go fuck yourself. And I'm not gonna lie, this broke my heart. For about 5 minutes. Right up until he DM'd me this message. Even Hitler was right about some things, which I did not reply to. Because what the fuck do you even say to that? And a few hours later, he followed up that he no longer has respect for me and blocked me. Like, okay, Hitler simp, the feeling is mutual. At which point, I don't know, guys, I got a little petty and just said fuck it. And I posted the Hitler message. And I said, the Pierre Poilievre to Hitler was right pipeline is real. Then Spenny went insane for days. He said I backstabbed him. He said I douched him. And he called me a shitbag and a shit weasel. Because I didn't show the full context of him saying Hitler was right about some things. Which I don't really know what the appropriate context would be for something like that. But since he wants me to show the context so bad, I will oblige his request. Spenny sent me a video that was transphobic nonsense, and I said, hey man, this is transphobic nonsense, and I won't listen to it. And he said, you won't listen to the video just because the guy said one wrong thing? Even Hitler was right about some things. So I don't know. That's the context he wanted me to share, I guess. Yeah, sure, I said Hitler was right about stuff, but it's only because I'm transphobic. Is that the context that he wanted? I don't know. That doesn't seem any better for him, in my opinion. So maybe he wants me to share the full context of the DMs, in which he also straight up promoted genocide. So I don't know. He wants me to do the context, I'll do the context. Here's the full context of Spenny from Kenny versus Spenny saying Hitler was good sometimes. Basically, Spenny DM'd me after the first tweet and said I have some low IQ followers. I explained they're just confused because he went from being pretty anti-conservative to pro-Pierre seemingly overnight. And I tried to extend an olive branch and say that I still like Spenny, even though I disagree with him. Boy, do I regret sending that message. Spenny explained that he feels Trudeau is dangerous for the Jewish community, a community which he's a part of. He said you kind of need to be Jewish to get it, but it's a dangerous time for the community. He's against the pro-Palestinian protests because he sees them as being anti-Jewish, and the ICC thing, presumably Trudeau supporting the law, ultimately pushed him to publicly support Pierre Poilievre. I sympathize with his fear and acknowledge that I probably can't appreciate the full extent of it, being not Jewish myself. But that I too have recognized a rise in anti-Semitism, which I have, including in the pro-Palestinian protests. As a subgroup of people, absolutely use criticism of the Israeli government to justify their preconceived anti-Israel and anti-Semitic hate. Something that is incredibly obvious if you're not too stupid, unaware, ideologically compromised, or anti-Semitic to recognize it. I mean, we just saw this in Montreal with people rioting and screaming for the final solution. But I also clarified that I don't think every criticism of the Israeli government automatically amounts to anti-Semitism. Then I basically said what I said in this video, that Trudeau respecting international law is pretty normal, and Pierre saying we shouldn't is way crazier. And then Spenny got pretty fucking weird and contradictory, saying he's not talking about that, which is weird because he said the ICC thing is what pushed him to support Pierre, and I was responding to that. And he said that he condemned Netanyahu early on. He said there are Islamic terrorists that want to strap bombs to babies and kill Jews. The ICC and the UN are anti-Semitic, and that he hopes Israel nukes Palestine, which that one got me, because how are you going to say you condemn Netanyahu, but also say, I hope this guy pulls out the fucking nukes? So I said, I don't understand how the UN is anti-Semitic if it was made in response to the Holocaust to prevent shit like the Holocaust, and also the UN is what formed Israel. Then I said the nuke thing was fucked up, and he's saying that it's bad that anti-Semitic people want to kill Jews, but also saying that he wants to kill all Palestinians, 43% of which are children. To which he said that I'm quoting Hamas statistics to do a little research on the UN being anti-Semitic. He sent a video of some anti-Palestine military guy saying Israel isn't engaging in genocide because not every Palestinian is dead, which also really weird because he just said he wants to fucking nuke Palestine, like literally saying he wants all Palestinians to die, but saying it's not a genocide because not all Palestinians are dead. So I don't know what to do with that. Like, it's not a genocide yet. And a couple more links, one of which was a pro-Trump Sam Harris podcast. So I said the stat isn't a Hamas stat. It's from the Palestine Central Bureau of Statistics, which is an independent government organization. I replied to his video of the anti-Palestine guy saying it doesn't sound like the guy knows what genocide is, which has a legal threshold. And then I replied to the Sam Harris video he sent, which was sent at a timestamp of Sam Harris just spouting verifiably transphobic nonsense about the Olympics. How am I going to trust any part of this video if the guy is so wrong about something so well documented? To which Spenny said, it's a 30-minute video, give it a chance. Even Hitler was right about some things. And that's when I stopped replying. And then he blocked me. So there you have it, the full context. I don't know why he wanted me to share that so bad. I actually think it seems even worse in context with the transphobia and the I hope Israel nukes Palestine shit. But there it is, I guess. You're welcome, Spenny. Now will you please shut the fuck up?
Alright, thanks for watching. If you don't already, please consider supporting my Patreon at patreon.com/CallumXOXOX. And if you do, thank you so much. You're the best. So if you see your name flashing across the screen, or if it's about to flash across the screen, just know that your support hugely helps me in continuing to make these videos, whether you're an active supporter or just taking a little break or have decided just you're done with it. Whatever the case may be, thank you so much. Huge help, and yeah, till next time.